Why stunts?
I have a theory that the human condition is one of a real catch-22. We've got one instinct, which is to survive, and one guarantee, which is we won't survive. And I view the human experience largely as an exercise to come to terms with our mortality, to wrap our heads around it, to come to peace with it. And I view the different ways that people do that. There's reproduction. We have children, so then I think that eases people's mind about their mortality because they have a legacy living on with their children that they won't really be dead. Then of course people turn to religion because they think everything's going to be great when they go to heaven. And then there's people who leave stuff behind to outlive them. Like cavemen scrawling stick figures on the cave. It seems that they were just like I described, really upset about their mortality and leaving this art on the cave walls to outlive them. Because I had failed in university the way I did. I mean, I failed every which way that you can. And every attempt that I had ever had to be employed ended in disaster. I was fired from literally every job that I ever had. So not being able to make it through school or keep a job, I felt absolutely just not qualified to navigate the world. I believed that I was going to fail at life, like badly and quickly. And I think that this idea that I believed that I was just going to fail at life and die very young. I think that it heightened my mortality issues because even though I was young, but like man, I think I was somehow angry at the idea of death, and my theory is that I was lashing out at death by climbing off of balconies and just dangling from my hands off like 12 stories and then letting go and dropping onto the balcony below. Like that was totally life threatening, especially how intoxicated I was while doing that. And like I said, I wanted that girl who dumped me to think I was gonna die. Like there was this idea of mortality was very woven into all of the art, and so I think that I was upset about mortality and lashing out at it. I was mocking death, taunting it.
What? Why you? Because that is, I understand at a certain level, we all probably have that relationship with our mortality. But you seem to, more than anyone I've ever spoken to, have had a more close and adverse relationship with the concept of mortality, the concept of death. Like you seem to, the way that I'd word it plainly is like you seem to have the biggest problem with death than anyone I've met.
All right.
Why?
Um, I think about it. I've always thought about it.
Since you were young.
I'd say so. Yeah, I would absolutely say that. I seem to recall being quite young. I wouldn't know an age, but quite young, and being in the bathtub. Just for some reason, I was thinking about it's going to be the year 2000, and like we weren't really anywhere near the year 2000. But just kind of doing math in my head, trying to calculate how old I would be at the turn of the millennium. And I came to 25. I'll be 25 years old. And the thought was, I'll never live that long. No, I'll never make it that long. Um, and again, I don't know how old I was, but I was definitely a child when I had that thought. And and the older I got, the more convinced I was, and that I wasn't gonna live very long. And perhaps that's another manifestation of my alcoholism. But I think that really, to describe alcoholism, there's a, like, I felt defective. I felt like there was just something wrong with me, that things weren't gonna work. You know, and I think that to some extent is a characteristic of alcoholism for a lot of alcoholics. Feel like just uncomfortable in your own skin. They describe it as restless, irritable, and discontented. Um, Defective is a word that really resonates with me.
Does that ever subside?
Ooh, it's a tough one because I don't think so. I mean, to an extent, yeah. I'm definitely better with all that now. Like what, but at the same time, it doesn't go away. I think that it improves and it fluctuates, and but what doesn't go away is this default setting I have that everything's not going to be okay. I live in this perpetual state of terrible anxiety and stress, that just things are not going to be okay, and I've got to just hurry up and frantically work and hustle to try to make it so everything will be okay.
I'm not surprised to hear that because it is the story I've heard over and over and over and over and over again sat here.
Okay, yeah, okay,
You know what I mean?
good. Yeah.
And it surprises me because before I started doing this podcast and having these conversations, I assumed that something, have a certain upbringing, childhood, you're programmed in a certain way, you go to therapy and it's fixed.
Yeah.
And it's actually been, I asked the question purely because I've never heard anyone say anything other than what you've said.
Right.
So, and I think it's actually helpful because it helps people know that they're not, their efforts to heal in whatever context that they've tried to heal doesn't make them inadequate. It makes them very much human. That, the way that we're programmed and hardwired because of whatever reasons, it is not something that is easy or in many cases possible just a therapy away or to prescription
Right.
away. And I think that makes people people feel better.
And what's crazy too is that I think, and I'm fascinated that you say this is something they've heard many times,
I've never not heard it.
right. Um, and I would also guess that for all of the successful people that you've spoken with, that they would describe having been much more at peace, much more serenity, much more happiness before they were successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so counterintuitive to imagine that that's the case, but there's one saying that I think really explains it to a degree, which is that this is the saying: a man who has nothing only has to worry about his next meal, but a man who has everything worries about his last meal.
Yes.
And that messes me up, man. That messes me up big time, because if you're just focused on the next meal, then you're in the moment. Life's pretty simple. It's not too much of a task to accomplish finding your next meal. But once you've got your next meal covered, and then it's like, all right, and then I've saved up some money. I'm good. My next meals are set for the next year. But then now you're thinking, how long am I set for? And once you start thinking, how long am I set for? Then life gets really scary when because you're not in the moment and you're future tripping and everything isn't going to be okay. And then and what's even crazier is that I understand that there's been studies about financial security, and it's people who have upwards of $10 million net worth who find themselves feeling considerably more financially insecure than anybody who has less. The more money you have, the more financially insecure you feel.
The study that I read about this, it says that they interviewed people all the way up the wealth income spectrum, and they asked them the question, how much money, how happy are you out of 10? And then they asked them the second question, which is how much money would you need to be 10 out of 10 happy? And all the way up the wealth spectrum, people said 3 times currently what they have now. So millionaires said they needed 3 million. People with 10 million said they needed 30 to be a 10 out of 10 happiness. And people with 100K said they needed 300K, which speaks to this sort of like hedonic, endless treadmill and increasing anxiety.
Right. And also studies are pretty clear that happiness will increase up to
Like a baseline, it's like 75K.
Yeah,
household.
Yeah, I think that number is just going up with inflation. I understood it to be like 60,000.
Yeah.
60,000 a year, and then you've got all of your needs met, and then after that, more money doesn't really equate to more happiness.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.